When we first started using MyInnerGenius at IBM, we asked the Digital Workplace Services Group to determine whether it would provide value for the company. That group hires massive numbers of people every year, which are then outsourced to other companies. Well, as you can imagine, attrition can be a big problem in an organization like that. We determined that we could save IBM an enormous amount of money by simply using MyInnerGenius at the front end of the hiring process. We're talking $60 million every year in hiring costs, increased productivity, reduced attrition. See, MyInnerGenius ensures that your candidates, students, and employees will love their roles and that they'll be successful in them. But how does that translate to your bottom line? Well, I'm going to walk you through an attrition calculator. I will plug in some numbers based on typical industry standards and show you how it works. If you download the calculator, you can plug in any numbers you would like to match what actually happens in your organization. So let's take a look. Okay, so here's how this works. Very simple calculation, and a lot of this is industry standard information. I plugged them in already, so you can take a look. But the average hours worked in a year is typically 2,080. Yours may be less or more, but that's the typical industry standard. The average base salary, $100,000. Again, you might put in $50,000, you might put in $200,000, but you can put that in yourself. And then the benefits are typically around 30%. So based on those numbers, the daily cost per employee calculates to $500 per employee. Now then, if you start to look at the vacancy costs when an employee leaves the company, there are costs to cover a person, and typically about 16 hours per week is spent by somebody filling that position. So the daily cost is going to be roughly around $200 based on these salary numbers. The number of days vacant, let's just put 90 in, you might have 60 or longer. So the cost to cover for that employee is going to be about $18,000 to cover that employee. Now you have to, have hiring manager costs and manager costs as well. So your hiring manager, put in the salary for your hiring manager. I put in $75,000. The hourly rate then turns out to $375. Departing cost, you have an exit interview with a hiring manager, typically about 2 or 3 hours. I put in 3 hours, so that's $1,100. And then there's another cost maybe of, equipment or things like that. You could put in $500 for that, but you can put in your own number. So how many applicants do you have per one hire? Typically around 50. Again, you can put in a different number. And then the potential hiring screening hours, and this is based on 10 minutes each. So this just calculates based on the number of people you put up there. Then you have your first cut, the people that are going to come through. I'm going to put in 30% make the first cut. Then you have a screening interview, right, for the potential hires. And I just put in a calculation based on the numbers above. Then you have a second cut, right, for the second interview. 20% might make it to the next cut. So then you have hours for that as well. So roughly about 3 hours of time in that second cut. So the total manager hours to fill the position is about 23. Then you might have some other costs for advertising or headhunter costs. Could be $500, could be $5,000. And then some other admin costs. I just put in a number of $200 for supplies and things like that. That means that the separation cost is about $10,000, $10,575. Now, you also have an onboarding manager. They have to onboard the employee. Put in the salary for that. I put in $150,000. And then you also then have a daily rate that calculates based on that. So how many days is it going to take to onboard a person? Let's just say it's 10 days over the period of those 90 days, right, to get them up to speed. You might have some other training costs as well for equipment and things like that. So I put in $500. There might be travel costs and things like that. Calculates to about $8,000. Now, how long does it take an employee to get to productivity? Well, we know that the cost is $500 per hour, that calculated earlier, right? I'm going to say 90 days to get a person fully up to speed. That means that you have a productivity loss, roughly around 50% is typical in the industry. Costs you about $22,000 in lost productivity in those first days. So ultimately, your cost then calculates the productivity loss, the hiring cost, and the attrition, and all these other things. Ends up being $59,075 based on a $100,000 employee. So let's say your company has 1,000 employees. Let's say your average attrition is 13%, right? Well, then your annual attrition is about 130 people per year, it calculates, right? Means your costs are $7 million if you have an organization of 1,000 people. If you have 100 people, obviously it's going to be, 1/10 of that. Now, MyInnerGenius will save a minimum of 1% in that attrition. Now, some calculations have it at much higher than that. But if we can reduce that 13% down to 12%, we can save an organization $590,000 in just 1 year based on 1,000 headcount. Again, if it were 100 people, it'd be $59,000. If it's 10,000, it could be $5 million. So you can see that the numbers add up very quickly. And if we can reduce it by 2%, well, put that number in, you can see obviously it's double. So that's an easy way to create an objective view of how you can reduce your costs by using MyInnerGenius in the hiring process. So that shows you how reducing attrition by just 1 percentage point can save you an enormous amount of money. You'll probably see even more, not to mention reduced frustration and higher morale. So to find out more about MyInnerGenius, go to myinnergenius.com or click on one of the links below. Thank you so much.